Good morning. It is Monday, July the 15th, and this is The Drill. And thank you very much. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States of America today, because I'm the only one that knows that the essence of conservatism is common sense. And this is The Drill, my podcast, and it's about demonstrating how to beat the left each and every day, to always win the arguments. My podcast is made possible by Spreaker.com, and it can be heard on iTunes, Spotify, Google, and YouTube. My email address is storytimes@hotmail.com. I'm on Twitter at Ronald Hardgrove and on Facebook at The Drill. So I started my socio-political odyssey as a conservative Republican. I was taught by the left that I was a conservative because of where I stood on the issues, which sounded reasonable. But whenever I engaged a liberal in debate, I couldn't win. And I soon figured out that the issues were a fallacy that only appeared reasonable, but were in reality a trap. The issues were created by the left for the left, and the issues are an attempt to subordinate reality to politics. So is there any way for a conservative to win? Yes, by redefining what it means to be a conservative. By redefining the word conservative, I will not only win, I will never lose. And the purpose of my broadcast is to demonstrate how to defeat the left each and every day. So that's the introduction to my show, and today I'm going to be covering several things. The first is I call the illusion of impunity, and then spanking and change. Glenn Beck, I told you so. Does it have to be that way? And firefighter suicides when I come back. Thank you very much, and welcome back. And this segment is called The Illusion of Impunity, and it's getting to the heart of the Colin Kaepernick situation. Lately, Colin Kaepernick was in the news because he objected to the Betsy Ross flag being put on Nike sneakers, and apparently he's a Nike advisor of some sort, and or a representative of Nike. So he objected, and Nike decided to remove that flag from their sneakers and do something else. Now, I've said in the past that that's Nike's business. It's their property, and they can put on, design their sneakers in whatever way they see fit, and they don't need my permission or Rush Limbaugh's permission to do so. But the one thing I haven't covered is the whole idea here as far as, because it doesn't deal with the question, why did Mr. Kaepernick do this in the first place? Why make the objection? What is this supposed to accomplish? How is the country supposed to be better off, i.e. farther to the left? Because there's no doubt that he is a lefty. And the reason what he's doing is he's trying to create, and because he's a big media person, whatever he says or does gets covered by the news departments across the country. So he's trying to create the illusion of impunity. And I say illusion because metaphysical law says that every action has consequences, both good and bad. And in this particular case, if you're going to go ahead and make a case out of not including the flag on a pair of shoes, then again, you should be suffering consequences for that. You might end up with, again, some positive, you're successfully able to influence the company, but there's also going to be negatives. He wants to make it out to be, as the left does, that one can operate with power. That's what power means to the left, operating with impunity. In other words, without fear of consequences, without fear that they're going to end up being boycotted, without interference, or without fear of having to suffer any type of consequences at all. Negative public opinion, for instance. There's people that are always quick, if you try to suggest that Colin Kaepernick is somehow unpatriotic, that are quick to defend him and nip that in the bud by calling it racist. and thereby shutting you up, and etc. And the reason that they want to go ahead, the left wants to give everybody the illusion that they're acting with impunity is attraction purposes. What is the purpose of being a lefty if not power? And the left always says, we will empower you. And that's exactly what they intend to do. They want you to believe that if you become a lefty, you can do whatever you want and get away with it. A lot of times the way this is done is through bluffing. The left bluffs constantly. And the essence of bluffing is basically pretending to have information that you really don't have. That you have some kind of special knowledge about something that's going on that nobody else has. And so people become intimidated and they change their behavior on that basis. So what is it exactly that should, if we're talking about him operating with impunity, if he is to suffer consequences, what kinds of consequences should he suffer? What should happen, at least at the very least, is that when right-wing pundits, right-wing radio talk show hosts talk about, and the reason, by the way, he operates with impunity is because he's allowed to, okay, or gives the illusion of operating with impunity is because he's allowed to. Every right-wing talk show host in this country should be saying about Colin Kaepernick that that's fine. You can speak, you can say whatever you want to because of the First Amendment, but I get to speak as well, and I have, like everyone else in this country, the ability to decide who it is I'm going to associate with and who I'm not going to associate with. And you can, they should come out on the radio and say, Colin Kaepernick, you are persona non grata in my house. You are not welcome in my house. You are not welcome on my radio show. You are not welcome on any property I own. Every talk show host in the country should do that. And every right-thinking true conservative should be doing the same thing, saying, that's fine. You want to smear the country, basically. You want to spit on our country and in the country's heritage, then you're free to do so vis-a-vis the Constitution. But I'm free to speak as well, and I'm free to decide who I'm going to associate with and who I'm not going to associate with, and you're not welcome in my house. So when I come back, I'm going to be talking about spanking and change. Thank you very much. And before I get to spanking and change, I did want to one further note on the Colin Kaepernick thing is that the left, it's important because the left sees this. People on the left see Colin Kaepernick apparently getting away with it, and they become emboldened to do the same thing in their lives. They become emboldened to do it at work. They become emboldened to do it at the family level, friends, etc., that are going to make unreasonable demands and expect that those demands are going to be met and that there's not going to be any consequences. One of the ones that I was thinking about right away is that there was a group of people in a company recently that decided they were going to go on strike because they didn't like the company. What it was a mattress, or was it, I think, let's just say in a mattress company. They were selling mattresses to, it wasn't actually a mattress company, it was a retail outlet that was selling mattresses to ICE. So a group of employees decided, since they don't like ICE, that they're going to go ahead and strike. They're going to go on strike and quit working. Well, there has to be consequences for that, up to and including termination of employment. But where did they get the boldness to go ahead and do something like that in the first place? Colin Kaepernick. Colin Kaepernick gets away with it. We can get away with it too. No, you can't. There's consequences for everything. And there's property rights. Part of what Colin Kaepernick is doing is he's making a statement, but he's doing it on his own turf. If he wants to go ahead and say, hold a press conference and say, this is the way I feel about something, he can do that. If he claims, of course, to represent Nike, then it's a little bit of a different situation. And again, with these people that are going on strike, it's not their turf. The property belongs to the business, and is the business that has the rights associated with that property, and it has the right to establish consequences. If you're not, at the very least, you would figure these folks are going to get docked pay. But again, they expect to get away with it. I'm sure they expect to be paid for that protest and to not have to suffer any other types of consequences, such as suspensions or termination of employment. So, spanking and change. One of the things that occurred to me about, I was thinking about this morning for some reason, is that I never see children getting spanked in public anymore. When I was growing up, it happened all the time. I got spanked in public. And people felt very comfortable spanking their children in public. You'd see it at the grocery stores, and you'd see it just about anywhere and everywhere. If a kid was acting up and needed to be paddled, they'd get swatted right there. And we had some people some parents that would prefer to wait until you got home. And they would tell you, you wait till you get home. Or sometimes wait till your dad gets home. That kind of thing. And then you would get swatted. They didn't want to do it in public. But it used to happen fairly often that kids would get spanked in public, especially when they're acting up. You're in the grocery store and you're throwing a temper tantrum because mom won't get you a toy or a piece of candy. Whoop, whoop, you get your bottom spanked right there on the spot. And nobody thought anything about it. Nobody went and called the police or Child Protective Services because nobody thought they were empowered. Because remember, people that do things like calling Child Protective Services and whatnot, unless you're talking about cases where the children are clearly being abused, where a felony is occurring, people that are calling Child Protective Services because a child gets spanked is simply trying to exercise power. They are trying to actually usurp the authority of the parents and pretend that they know better than the parents what's best for the child. But what I wanted to get to here with it is that there's no doubt that our society has changed within that, as far as that's concerned. You just don't see it anymore where children are getting spanked. Very often you don't even see it at home. You don't hear about it at home anymore. You don't hear about kids, well, I did this, I did that, and my mom took and whooped me and spanked me, and I was crying. You don't hear about it anymore, and apparently spanking is off the radar, or I was going to say gone out of style, but it's not a style thing. But it's no longer a technique or a tool or technique of the average parent. And the point being is that this is an issue of change. Things have changed, but the question is, and we've kind of accepted that it's changed, but I don't think anybody has really questioned it. Are we a better civilization for this change? So much change on the left is gratuitous. It's just change for the sake of change. Change so that an individual or individuals can feel powerful. And they don't care about the effect that this change has on our society or what effect this change has had on our civilization. It can be seen as a case for counter change. Maybe it's time to, since our society is obviously no better or worse off for the fact that we have, or let's say no better off, because no change is meant to make our society or civilization worse. Since we're obviously no better off, then why not bring spanking back? A lot of times the left argues for change, saying it's an experiment. Well, we need to conduct an experiment. That's based on determinism, and determinism is dead, but that's their argument anyways. Let's just do an experiment. Okay, well, the experiment has failed. Keynesian economics is another experiment that has failed. And the failure of an experiment is another prima facie case for change. Well, how do we change? We go back to what it is that we were doing before. In this particular case, with the case of spanking kids, we go back to spanking. Our society is no better off because we decided that we are not going to, or we're going to refrain from spanking our children. Okay, and I still say that, and it's, I think, an issue of common sense. The children should be seen and not heard anyhow. So when I come back, I'm going to be talking about Glenn Beck, I Told You So. Thank you very much. Welcome back. Glenn Beck, I Told You So. And so many of the pundits do this. They make predictions, and I've talked about this before, where making predictions is not conservative. If you want to be conservative, you make value judgments. You make value statements. But most of these pundits, they haven't figured that out yet. They just copy the left. The left makes predictions, so Glenn Beck and Rush Limbaugh, etc., or et al., think they have to do the same thing. So Glenn Beck is talking this morning, and he says, he's talking about how he has something coming up on his show that's vitally important, and he wants you to be ready. He wants you to contact your friends. He wants you to be sitting at your laptop. He wants to have your printer ready because you're going to need to go to a site, and he's going to give you a link, and blah, 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 blah. So, and then he starts talking about how he made predictions. I told you that XYZ was going to happen years ago. I told you this was going to happen years ago. I told you such and such was going to happen years ago. And so basically what it amounts to is, I told you so. Okay, so the question then is, so what? Other than feeding your ego, what good does it do to tell me, I told you so? Now, it does work if you're a parent and you're telling children. I used to hear it from my parents all the time. They say, I told you not to do that. Okay, and you went ahead and did it anyway. I told you not to touch the stove because it's hot. And now you burned yourself. See, I told you so. And that's perfectly appropriate. Glenn Beck's not my parent. So I don't care what he told me so 5 years ago. What he should have been doing was if he is, and part of what he was doing is complaining that nobody really listened to him. I told you this. I told you years ago, and nobody did anything. Nobody seemed to be interested. Of course not. Because you approach everything in a value-neutral manner. He's caught up in this idea, I'm going to lay out the facts and let my audience decide. Bad idea. Bad idea. What you need to do is make value judgments. Back them up. You need to back up those value judgments and explain to your audience how you arrived at those conclusions, and that you did so in a logical and meaningful way. And if you can do that, then you can expect your audience to take certain types of action. Not a bad idea to make some suggestions as to what your audience could or should do. And again, this is one of the differences of my podcast versus radio shows and podcasts of other right-wing pundits who basically just want to pontificate and then leave you frustrated and angry at the end of the show. My show is about teaching you how to defeat the left each and every day. So one of them is, like I said, with the impunity issue, they've got to suffer consequences. And then as far as the I told you so, one of the best and easiest ways to defeat a liberal is just simply making a value judgment and challenging them to do the same thing. If somebody a lefty comes and criticizes you and says, well, that's extremist, because that's a frequent criticism you hear from the left. Well, that's extremist. You say, but am I wrong? Ask them. Try it sometime. Am I wrong? And it'll shut them up. It's because they can't answer that question because they refuse to acknowledge right and wrong. As far as they're concerned, right and wrong just doesn't exist. And it doesn't exist because socialism can't stand up to ethical scrutiny. And so their attitude is, socialism is supposed to happen because Karl Marx said so. So if there's anything in the way of socialism, it must be wrong. So therefore, ethics is wrong. Reality is wrong. Knowledge is wrong. They approach things backwards. So, I told you so in making predictions. Bad idea. Not conservative. That's the way the left does things. Make value judgments. Think it through. Know what you're talking about. Be prepared to back it up. But make those value judgments. And also be prepared to admit that you're wrong. If you got the facts wrong and so your conclusion is wrong, be prepared to say, I made a mistake. And what I should have said is XYZ. And that's what, but Glenn Beck and Rush Limbaugh does it all the time. I told you years ago, I told you this, I told you so, I told you so. As a matter of fact, I thought didn't he write a book called I Told You So? Who cares? Who cares you told me so? It's what a worthless habit to be engaged in making predictions and then telling people I told you so. How counterproductive and a waste of time. So when I come back, does it have to be that way? Thank you very much. Welcome back. So the left likes to sloganeer. They love slogans. It's because it's an easy and quick way to get into somebody's psyche. Okay? And this is one of the problems of pundits on the right, is that when they're trying to defeat something, they'll spend 2-3 minutes, sometimes 10 or 20 minutes going on and on and on about why this is wrong. And the problem with that is that you and I don't have time for that. They can. Rush Limbaugh has 3 hours. And if he wants to spend all 3 hours complaining about Colin Kaepernick, he can do it. He can afford to do so. You and I can't. If I'm in the grocery store and I'm at the checkout line and somebody's talking to me about Colin Kaepernick, I can't go on a 20-minute diatribe, even if I could remember whatever it is that Rush Limbaugh said. Same thing goes with the soccer field. Same thing goes at work. If I'm at work and I'm in the break room with some other people, I can't go on a 20-minute diatribe. And if I get really heated about it, I might end up in human resources. So, you have to find ways, what I call counter slogans. Short, pithy little statements that will shut the left up on the spot. Okay? And so one of their favorite slogans that jams Republicans up and conservatives up every single time is, does it have to be that way? When you come out and say, well, this is the way it is, the rejoinder to that from the left is, but does it have to be that way? And the right gets jammed up on that every time. Its simple rejoinder is, does it have to change? Because what they're doing when they say, does it have to be that way, is they're trying to make you prove a negative, which is impossible. Does it have to be that way is asking you to prove that something shouldn't happen or that a change should not occur. It's impossible. You can't do that. So you end up losing the argument. And the way to win the argument is by switching the burden to the left where it belongs. So, in this particular case, they're asking you, does it have to be that way? You respond with a question, does it have to change? If they come out and say yes, then you ask why. Now you're back on the right track. They're on their heels. They are the ones that are now having to provide proof. They won't be able to. Because, see, one of the secrets is that everybody on the left is not on the left because they've been convinced to be a lefty. They're on the left because they have been manipulated, bullied, and intimidated into being on the left. That means they don't know what they're talking about. They pretend. They have a lot of chutzpah, a lot of guts, a lot of confidence, false confidence. Okay? So to make you think they know what they're talking about. And that's the essence, again, of a bluff. When you're bluffing, you're pretending to have knowledge you don't actually have. Don't be afraid to call their bluff. And that's exactly what you're doing here. Well, does it have to be that way? It sounds like a deep question, doesn't it? Sounds like something that they've really thought about. They've probably got the answer to. And so you're stuck. No, it's easy. Does it have to change? Perfectly logical question. And if they try to get back on, no, but, does it have to be that way? You say, no, but, does it have to change? and they'll be stymied. They'll have nothing to say. They'll stare at you, or maybe they'll go ahead and give you a dirty look. But the point is, you win the argument. Again, there's no reason for conservatives to sweat. There's no reason for us to get upset. There's no reason for us to bubble and fizz or throw temper tantrums. No reason. Because we have nothing to prove to the left, ever. The left always has the burden of proof. Make them sweat. Make them prove it. And you know what? They can't. So when I come back, there's an article in the Washington Times that's about firefighter suicides that has some interesting things in it when I come back. Thank you very much. Welcome back. So let's see. I'm going to go ahead and should have got the article up straight away, but it is... Nope. It moved on me, so let's try this. They're talking about the article, maybe if it's still there. Let's see. Next time I'm going to do this kind of thing first, so I don't end up losing the article. Let's see. All right. Well, I think I'm going to have to go ahead and I wanted to read the entire article, but what the essence of it is that the article was about wildland or wildfires, and there's firefighters that specialize in dealing with wildfires, as opposed to firefighters that deal with structure fires, houses and office buildings that are on fire. And they're talking about a specific individual who committed suicide 3 years ago in 2016, and said that he was an individual that was fairly high-ranking individual in the wildfire apparatus, and that he would be overseeing and directing the activities of up to 1,000 people at any one given time. And it also went on to explain that there were friends of his that said, I never knew, I never saw it coming, kind of a thing. And so what they're trying to do is eliminate these firefighter suicides. Apparently there's been a rash of them. And that's the first thing that attracted me to the article, is the left and too much in our culture. Our culture's going that way, and because there's nobody on the right except me to say stop BS, throw the BS flag on it. And what they want to do is they want to eliminate. That means 100%. They want zero suicides. It's like in LA. There's the mayor has a project called Project Zero, and the idea is to have zero pedestrian fatalities. Fatalities. There's been a rash of pedestrians getting hit by cars and killed. And so he wants zero. But that's ridiculous. No politician, when I was growing up, ever talked about eliminating anything. They were reasonable, they were rational, and they talked about reducing. If you had a murder rate that was high, the mayor would say, my aim is to reduce the murder rate 25%, let's say. And I believe I can do this because, and he'll lay out the reasons why he thinks he can reduce it 25%. But nobody was foolish enough to come out and say, I'm going to eliminate murders. I'm going to eliminate automobile accidents. Okay, because it's not possible. We know that because there's no evidence. Nobody's ever produced any evidence that it is possible. So that's the one thing. The other thing that interested me about this article is they were talking about this guy. And as I was reading about this guy that committed suicide in 2016, this wildfire fighter, he and having a huge amount of responsibilities, and also it's got to be an exciting thing. Being a firefighter's got to have a lot of excitement to it. And for most people, then that are normal folks, then that's fine. You deal with the excitement and you move on. But there are people, a lot of people on the left, that are addicted to excitement. They have an addiction. They get an adrenaline rush, and then every time that let's say they go out and fight a fire, and they get an adrenaline rush from it. So they're wow. And so then they find the next time they go out and fight another fire, they don't get quite the same rush. Okay? It's a little bit more routine. And the one after that is even more routine. But they're addicted to that adrenaline rush. They want more and more and more. For instance, a guy that I knew that was a parachutist, do free falls. He'd jump out of airplanes. And so he was, you start usually at 3 to 5,000 feet on a static line. You don't get to pull your own ripcord when you first begin. I did one of those jumps. But that was good enough for me. I thought, yeah, it was a bit of a rush, but I'm fine. I don't need to keep doing this. But this guy that I knew, it was of course go higher and then get up to 30,000 feet, jump out with an altimeter and fly. And then when you get to a certain point, you get to a certain altitude, you deploy your parachute and go from there. And then that wasn't a high enough for this guy. Then it was skydiving in the nude. So then once that rush doesn't satisfy him, then what he did was there's a cliff over the Colorado River. Apparently it hangs over a portion of the Colorado, over a highway and near the Colorado River. And he went up there and dove off of it. And he dove off this thing, went over the highway, into the river, hit a log, and he punctured his lung and screwed up his elbow, and he ended up in the hospital for quite a while. But he's the only guy that's ever survived. Apparently a lot of people have tried to make that dive from that particular cliff, and none of them have lived to tell the story. Most of them ended up on the highway. Okay, so he's the only guy that has taken that dive and lived to tell about it. And he does not hesitate to tell everybody the story, how he did it, and he's really excited about it. This is a guy that's an adrenaline junkie. He's an excitement junkie. And the guy that is the firefighter that committed suicide, I believe he was also an adrenaline junkie, an excitement junkie. And the reason this is relevant to my podcast is because the left promotes excitement. The left encourages people to be excited. The attitude of the left is that everything in life, that the meaning of life is to have fun. And if things aren't fun and exciting, they're not worth doing. Now the pathology of being addicted to excitement is that, again, every time you get excited, the next time it doesn't ring your bell quite as strong. So you look for more excitement. And especially if you become depressed. You go out, you get excitement, and usually by acting impulsively, doing things that are impulsive, like the guy that jumped into the river. That's not something he planned to do. He didn't 2 or 3, 4 or 5 years before say, I'm going to jump off that bridge, so I'm going to make plans and work up. No, just one day he just decided, I'm going to dive off this cliff. And I think also it may have very well have been a suicide attempt. He may not have realized it at the time, but may very well have ended up being a suicide attempt, because every time you get this rush, and then what happens after the rush? You're in a depression. And the depressions get deeper and longer lasting, and the rushes get shorter and less intense, until the point in your life where you're depressed most of the time, and almost nothing you do pulls you out of that funk. There's no more excitement that you can get to get you out of that depressive episode. And that's when you get to the point where you say, why bother? And you check out. And again, I put a lot of that on the left. for promoting, and actually more on conservatives for not putting it in check. This attitude that excitement is the way to go, that you should act impulsively, that the way it goes is, the left says, the meaning of life is to have fun. How do you have fun? By acting impulsively. Look at all the cultural cues that we get in our lives each and every day that say excitement, 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 excitement. Well, things have to be exciting. Ooh, exciting, exciting. Commercials that you see, booking.com, for instance. Oh, be a booker. And look at all these people that are having exciting good times. And then you get the idea that life is about excitement and constant excitement. So if your life is not exciting, there must be something wrong with you. And your life must be depressing and boring. Look at what happens on social media, the excitements of social media and the promotion again of that left-wing cultural idea that everything has to be fun, everything has to be exciting all the time, and if you're not fun, if you're not exciting, you have no life. Or as the left-wing culture is, you put your fingers to your forehead in the shape of an L for loser. If you're not doing things that are fun and exciting, if you're not having sex all the time with different partners, and who knows, maybe even with animals, you're a loser. You aren't having fun. You aren't achieving, the meaning of life. So again, and make plans. That's the counter to it. How do you counter the addiction to excitement? Is you've got to make plans, and even more important than that, you have to value serenity. Serenity is the midway point between excitement and depression. You don't want to be depressed, you want to be excited, and you don't want to be bouncing back and forth between those two things. A lot of addicts have this problem where they get excited because of their addiction creates a certain amount of excitement for them, and they go through the battle of being excited and then depressed, and you wake up the next day and you're depressed, and so you try to get a bigger rush next time, get even more excited, and eventually again you get to the point where your life is all depression, no excitement, and you may as well check out. So serenity is the midpoint. That's what you're looking for in life. So don't let the left-wing culture convince you that everything you have to do is fun and exciting. What you're looking for is a measure of serenity, peacefulness. It doesn't mean that you have to be lethargic. It doesn't mean that you have to be dull. But that what you're looking for is peacefulness, and that you want to avoid unnecessary excitement. There's people that I've known throughout my life that, again, went out of their way to look for excitement. It might be fights. I knew a guy that whatever it took, he dealt drugs, he would do motocross, get on a motorcycle and take unreasonable risks on that motorcycle. He got in apparently some biker came, had a road rage thing, and so he took a hammer out and hit the guy in the head with a hammer. And why? Because he really needed to do that? He really needed to defend himself? No, out of a sense of excitement. So all the things that he was doing was, again, geared towards excitement. Gear your life to serenity. That's the conservative answer, the right answer, the common sense answer. So, who are the true conservatives? They are people that understand that conservatism is not just political but cultural as well. They are patriotic people who use common sense. They make judgments instead of predictions, speak clearly and definitively, and are not afraid to say no. They are open-minded, asking why rather than why not. They are consistent, credible, and influential, not ashamed of their existence, unafraid to learn or correct their mistakes. They are normal Americans. And that brings me to the conclusion of another episode of The Drill. And until next time, thank you very much for listening, and have a great day.